Have you ever been going about your day, folding laundry, walking down a familiar street, sitting quietly in your car, and suddenly a name or a face appears in your mind? Uninvited, clear, vivid. It's not just a memory, it's not a coincidence. It feels deliberate. This is what many would call a divine nudge. And though it arrives quietly, almost like a passing breeze, its purpose is rarely accidental. In the realm of the unseen, where God communicates not with thunderclaps but whispers, these moments are often the first signal of something greater unfolding. The human mind is not a random machine. It's deeply spiritual. The thoughts we think aren't always our own creations. Sometimes they're invitations, gentle alerts from a higher intelligence that sees what we cannot. Divine nudges rarely come with a loud announcement. They're the soft alarm bells of heaven. And if you're spiritually attuned, you begin to recognize them not as coincidences but as divine coordination. When God wants to get your attention, he doesn't always use dramatic signs. Instead, he speaks in subtleties, planting a person in your thoughts repeatedly, until you pause and wonder, why them? You may not have spoken to them in years. Maybe there was no unfinished business. Maybe there was, but the point is not just the thought, it's the weight of that thought, the pull you feel inside that says this matters. This is not emotional nostalgia. It's not a wandering mind. It's communication through impression. God often uses the rhythm of your own thinking to drop sacred cues. The face you see isn't random. The name that echoes isn't noise. These nudges are seeds meant to be noticed, held, and responded to. But because they are subtle, they are easy to miss. Most people brush them off. It's just my imagination, they say. But the spiritually aware know better. They know that God rarely shouts. He nudges. And those nudges are intentional. Every person that crosses your mind unexpectedly could be someone in need of prayer, someone undergoing a battle, someone needing love, encouragement, or even rescue. You might be the only one sensitive enough to receive the signal, and in that moment you become a vessel for divine intervention, not because you chased it, but because you listened. That's the miracle of it. Divine nudges require stillness. They require a heart quiet enough to recognize what the mind cannot explain. When you are walking in alignment with God, your thoughts are often the runway for his messages to land. And it won't always make sense to you immediately. It may feel inconvenient, awkward, or even out of place. But it's not about comfort, it's about connection. God works through willing vessels, and divine nudges are often his way of whispering, I need you for something. There's a sacred trust in that kind of communication. When God places someone on your heart, he's extending a part of his mission to you. You may not know the details. You may never find out why you felt that urge to pray for them or reach out. But obedience to the nudge is often more important than understanding it. That's faith in motion, acting without full clarity, trusting that the God who placed the thought within you is orchestrating something meaningful through you. So the next time you suddenly think of someone out of the blue without prompt pause, don't dismiss it. Sit with it. Ask, is this a divine nudge? Because in that question you open yourself to participating in a divine plan far bigger than you realize. And in that space between thought and response, miracles often begin. There are moments in life when logic offers no satisfying answer. You analyze, assess, and run every detail through the filter of reason, yet something still doesn't sit right. Or maybe it feels too right, too quickly, and it doesn't make sense on paper. This is where spiritual intuition enters, bypassing logic entirely and speaking to the deeper layers of your being. It's a knowing that doesn't require proof, a feeling that doesn't wait for validation, a quiet certainty that rises without explanation. And when it comes, especially when you suddenly and constantly think of someone, it's not your imagination. It's your spirit perceiving something your mind can't comprehend yet. Spiritual intuition is the language of the soul. It doesn't shout, it doesn't debate, it just knows. You feel the energy of someone before they call. You think of a friend you haven't seen in years, and later learn they were going through something on that exact day. You wake up with their name in your heart, and you don't know why, but the emotion is real. The pull is undeniable. Logic would tell you to let it go. That it's just coincidence, that it doesn't mean anything. But the spiritual part of you refuses to let it pass without attention. That's because the spirit isn't limited by time or physical distance. It's tuned to something eternal, something divine. God speaks through that intuitive frequency, bypassing the intellect to reach the heart. And when your spirit is aligned, you begin to sense things before they manifest in the natural world. Your discernment sharpens. Your sensitivity increases. And suddenly a random thought doesn't feel so random anymore. A persistent memory doesn't feel like nostalgia. It feels like an assignment. In a world dominated by logic and evidence, this way of living can feel irrational. It's not taught in classrooms, it's not easily explained in conversations, but anyone who's walked closely with God knows this truth deeply. Some of the most important moves in life are made through faith, not facts, through feeling, not formulas, through intuition, not intellect. Spiritual intuition overrides logic because it operates in a different realm, one where the unseen carries more weight than the visible. This doesn't mean you discard reason. It means you don't limit yourself to it. Logic is a gift, but it has boundaries. It can't predict divine timing. It can't measure the energy between souls. It can't explain why your heart aches for someone you haven't spoken to in years, but your spirit knows. And sometimes God will allow certain thoughts to return, persistently and uninvited, to get your attention. He doesn't always use billboards or dreams. Sometimes he simply places a person on your heart again and again until you act. That's not a glitch in your mind, that's a message from the divine. The challenge is this: can you trust what you feel, even when it doesn't make sense? Can you follow a whisper when the world demands a shout? Because spiritual intuition isn't about having all the answers. It's about honoring the signal. When you act on it, whether by praying, checking in, or simply being present, you participate in something bigger than yourself. You become a vessel, a bridge between heaven and earth. And while the mind may argue, the spirit simply responds. It doesn't need to know why. It just knows that it's time. Time to listen. Time to move. Time to trust the inner pull that logic can't explain. Because more often than not, what begins as a quiet nudge becomes the spark that changes everything for you and the one God placed on your heart. When someone constantly enters your thoughts unexpectedly, consistently, even urgently, it's easy to assume you're meant to do something physical. To call, to show up, to question, to insert yourself into their story. But not every prompting is a call to intervene. More often it's a divine summons to intercede. Not with action, but with prayer. Not with control, but with surrender. God places people on your heart, not always for contact, but for covering. Intercession is the sacred act of standing in the gap. It's where your spirit connects with heaven on someone else's behalf. You may not know what they're going through. You may not have spoken in months or even years. Yet something in you feels a weight, a stirring, a nudge that doesn't go away. That nudge is not a license to rush in with questions or assumptions. It is an invitation to kneel. To carry them quietly before God, trusting that He knows exactly what's needed, even if you don't. The world teaches us to fix things, to insert ourselves, to ask, demand, or direct. But the spiritual realm operates differently. What feels like distance or silence from someone in the natural may be divine protection or timing in the unseen. You may want to reach out and fix what was broken or clarify what's unclear, but God may be asking something greater of you to release control and instead become a vessel of unseen support. There is deep humility in learning the difference between interfering and interceding. One is about your need to be involved, the other is about God's need for you to stand in faith. When we interfere, we risk disrupting processes God is carefully managing. When we intercede, we offer Him space to move. You're not meant to carry their story in your hands, you're meant to carry their name in your prayers. This doesn't mean you never act. Sometimes intercession leads to action, but it always starts with surrender. It begins in the secret place where no one sees you praying, crying, lifting someone up in love even when they have no idea. It's in those quiet moments that the spiritual work is done. The breakthrough often begins not in the interaction, but in the intercession. Many of the battles people face are invisible. You won't see the heaviness in their eyes because they've learned to hide it. You won't hear the desperation in their voice because they've grown skilled in silence. But your spirit feels it. That's why their name won't leave you. That's why your heart aches for them, without explanation. God is revealing their burden to you not so you can solve it, but so you can share in the spiritual labor of lifting it. There's also a divine boundary in all of this. Not every thought means re-entry. Not every feeling requires a phone call. Some connections are meant to stay sacred and unspoken. Your prayer may be the very shield they don't know they need. And sometimes your obedience in silence protects more than any words could. This is the quiet work of the intercessor, the one who feels deeply, prays earnestly, and acts only when led. The one who trusts God's timing over their own impulse. The one who doesn't chase closure, but offers covering. The one who understands that the most powerful form of love doesn't always involve proximity. It involves sacrifice, self-restraint, and deep spiritual trust. When someone repeatedly comes to mind, don't be so quick to jump in. Go first to your knees. The Spirit may be calling you not to interfere with their process, but to intercede for their protection. Because sometimes the most powerful moves you'll ever make in someone's life will happen in complete silence, known only to God. There are times when a name echoes in your mind or a face appears in your thoughts with no apparent reason, no recent interaction, and no emotional trigger. It's easy to interpret these moments through a personal lens, wondering if it's about reconciliation, unresolved feelings, or past memories rising to the surface. But not every spiritual signal is personal. Sometimes it's purposeful. What you're sensing may have little to do with your own story and everything to do with theirs. God might be using your sensitivity, your spirit, and your availability to serve a larger purpose beyond your understanding. We often assume that when someone resurfaces in our minds, it's about us, a reminder, a test, a call to revisit something familiar. But the truth is, the spiritual realm does not revolve around our emotional needs. It moves with divine intention. You could be thinking about someone not because there's unfinished business, but because you're the one selected to stand guard in prayer or to hold space for them in the invisible. That connection, while it once may have been personal, has now shifted into something sacred, something functional, a bridge through which God's intention flows. This distinction matters because it determines how we respond. If we assume it's personal, we may overstep. We might reach out with questions that were never meant to be asked. We might pursue answers that aren't ours to receive. But when we recognize the difference, we honor the boundary of spiritual maturity. We understand that being connected to someone doesn't always mean re-entering their life. Sometimes it means carrying their name before God without ever seeing them again. Purposeful connections don't always look dramatic. In fact, they often feel subtle, invisible, and emotionally neutral. You're not longing for the person. You're not chasing a memory. You're simply aware. Your soul is alerted, and you can't explain why. That alert is the signal. It's the tap on the shoulder from God saying, pay attention. They need covering. It could be that they're facing a storm you'll never witness, or that your presence in their memory is being stirred on their end too for reasons only heaven understands. One of the most humbling truths in spiritual life is this: not every divine assignment will come with context. You may never know why you were chosen to think of them, to pray for them, or to feel that unshakable sense of awareness about their name. But the lack of clarity does not diminish the weight of the call. You're not responsible for understanding the entire picture. You're responsible for responding faithfully to your part in it. This shift in perspective from personal to purposeful liberates us from emotional confusion. It frees us from reading into feelings that don't require response. It helps us stay spiritually aligned rather than emotionally entangled. When you accept that the connection is not about reuniting or resolving, but about obeying and uplifting, you step into the kind of spiritual authority that changes lives behind the scenes. God uses those who are open, those who are listening. You might be chosen simply because you're available, not because you're involved. He doesn't always need your hands, he sometimes only needs your heart. And when someone is placed on it, not once but repeatedly, you have to believe that it's not random, it's intentional. Their presence in your thoughts is not always about reopening a chapter, it could be about guarding one they're still writing. So when a connection rises that seems out of place, don't rush to make it about emotion or memory. Step back and ask, what if this is purposeful? Because more often than not, God is writing a story that doesn't center around your past. It aligns with your calling. There's a mysterious way in which memory works, surfacing names, moments, and emotions without our permission, often without reason. You might be sipping your morning coffee, driving home in silence, or standing in a line at the grocery store, and suddenly a memory of someone surfaces, unannounced, vivid, persistent. It may be someone you haven't thought of in years, someone you've forgiven, forgotten, or simply released. And yet here they are again, not in body but in thought. It's not a mistake, it's not your subconscious longing for closure. More often than we realize, it's God using memory as a messenger. Memory in its sacred form is not just a mental archive, it's a spiritual delivery system. God speaks through our senses, through dreams, through silence, and yes, through memory. When a specific person comes to mind without reason or pattern, it may be less about your history with them and more about their present need. Your memory becomes the bridge through which divine attention is sent their way, and you become the vessel, willing, awakened, chosen. We tend to reduce memory to nostalgia or trauma. We label it as something triggered by our emotional state or personal longing. But the spiritual life teaches a deeper truth. Memory can be divine instruction, a divine reminder, a signal, not a setback. And when a name, face, or moment reappears in your consciousness with an unusual weight, it could very well be heaven knocking gently on the door of your awareness, saying there's something here. Don't ignore it. Memory is one of God's quietest instruments. It doesn't always demand urgency, but it always invites attentiveness. You may recall someone's laughter or the way they used to carry pain behind their eyes. You may think of the last conversation you had and feel an unexplained shift in your spirit. Those aren't just recollections, they're divine nudges. God may be urging you to pray for their healing, to release any lingering bitterness, to bless them from a distance, or simply to hold space for them in your heart. There is no wasted detail in the way God speaks. What you remember when you remember it, and how it stirs your spirit, all carry purpose. Maybe someone needs intercession right now, and God knew you'd be sensitive enough to receive the prompt. Maybe they're at a crossroads, and your spirit caught the ripple of their unrest. Or perhaps there's something in your own journey that still requires reconciliation. Not in the form of words, but through surrender in prayer. Either way, the memory isn't there to torment you. It's there to activate you. We often pray for God to speak, to guide, to reveal. But when He answers through memory, we second-guess it. We dismiss it as the past or label it as overthinking. Yet the same God who speaks through Scripture, people and nature also speaks through the recollections He allows to rise within us. He knows what we carry and when to bring it forward, not to burden us but to refine, redirect, or reconnect us to our higher purpose. Sometimes the memory is not even about the person, but about the lesson. God may bring someone to mind to remind you of how far you've come or how far you still need to go. He may stir an old conversation so that a current one gains clarity. He may awaken a long-forgotten image simply to draw your heart into compassion again. So when your memory starts speaking, don't silence it too quickly. Don't rush to label it irrelevant or accidental. Sit with it. Listen to what your spirit feels, not just what your mind analyzes. Because memory in the hands of God is more than reflection, it's revelation. And the message it carries may be exactly what you and they need in this moment. There is a sacred tension in those moments when your heart is stirred for no visible reason. When someone's name lingers, when a quiet pull urges you to pray, reach out, or simply pause, these nudges don't come with loud commands or flashing signs. They're soft, gentle, easy to ignore, and yet they hold immense spiritual weight, because obedience to these small divine nudges often becomes the very key that unlocks deeper spiritual alignment. The kind that shifts atmospheres, connects destinies, and weaves your life more tightly into the purpose God designed for you. The nudge rarely makes sense at first. It interrupts your routine, defies your logic, and stretches your comfort. Why am I thinking about this person? Why now? Why with such intensity? But this is the nature of divine nudges. They often bypass understanding and go straight to your spirit. You don't need all the details to act. You just need to trust that the one who nudged you sees what you can't. That trust is obedience in its purest form, not driven by outcome, but by alignment. Obedience doesn't always look like big, dramatic movements. Sometimes it's the decision to stop and pray. Sometimes it's sending a message you weren't planning to send. Other times it's doing absolutely nothing externally, but agreeing internally. Yes, Lord, I hear you. I will hold this person in my heart. I will listen. I will move if and when you say so. That kind of quiet obedience pleases God because it shows that your heart is tuned to His whisper, not just His instruction. When you obey the nudge, you participate in something larger than yourself. You may never see the impact, you may never understand the reason, but the act itself builds spiritual muscle. It deepens your sensitivity, sharpens your discernment, and aligns your life with divine timing. One nudge obeyed may place you at the right place at the right time for something only heaven could orchestrate. One obedient prayer may become the covering that shields someone in their most vulnerable hour. You may never hear the testimony, but God sees the thread of your obedience woven through it. There's a deep peace that comes with spiritual alignment. It's not loud or boastful, it's quiet, but it's strong. When you learn to act on the nudge without needing proof or applause, you begin to walk in rhythm with the Spirit. You become less reactive to the chaos of life and more responsive to the guidance of heaven. And that's where true authority lives, not in knowing everything, but in trusting enough to act with little. Obedience also unlocks clarity. Often the step you're unsure about becomes clearer once you take it. God rarely shows the entire path. He shows the next step, and the nudge is often that step. You don't have to know why you're praying for them. Just pray. You don't have to know what your message will accomplish. Just send it. The obedience becomes the bridge between the unseen and the revealed. And it's on that bridge that your purpose becomes clearer, your faith becomes stronger, and your life becomes fuller, not through striving, but through surrender. The nudge is not a burden. It's an invitation to join heaven in its movement, to participate in love without needing a return, to walk so closely with God that his quietest whisper carries weight in your world, and in every yes you give to those quiet urgings, you become more than just a follower of faith. You become a carrier of it, a vessel through which God moves not because of your ability, but because of your availability. When someone unexpectedly and repeatedly enters your thoughts, it is rarely without reason. It may feel like a coincidence, an emotional flashback, or a curious interruption, but on a deeper level it can be a divine whisper, an unseen call from heaven inviting your spirit to respond. These moments are not accidents, they are signals, subtle, sacred, and intentionally placed. God doesn't always communicate through dramatic signs or loud instructions. More often he moves through divine nudges, intuitive pulls, spiritual impressions, and memory itself. When these arise, the response isn't to react impulsively or interfere emotionally, but to pause and discern, to intercede rather than insert. Because in the stillness of obedience, alignment takes shape. Your spirit begins to move in rhythm with something far greater than your understanding. Every thought that lingers, every memory that returns, every gentle tug on your soul could be God using you, your availability, your heart, your awareness as a vessel for unseen work. And though you may never witness the outcome, your obedience becomes the spark that ignites change, protection, healing, or connection in the life of another. So listen. Respond. Pray. Trust. The thoughts you're tempted to ignore may carry the very purpose you've been searching for. Because when God places someone on your heart, it's never random, it's sacred.